Want to welcome you to another episode of Mindset Growth Podcast. I'm Gary, your host. I am honored to have a guest return to the show, and we are going to introduce a book that he has coming out in the next several months. So welcome, Ray Gage, to our Mindset Growth Podcast.
Oh, it's great to be back, Gary.
I am excited to hear what your inspiration was behind this book, and if you could tell us a little bit about it and what maybe started this whole process to begin with. And then when you're ready, you can share the title with us. Maybe you want to start with that.
Right.
Kind of gave you a lead right there.
Right, exactly. It's an interesting, the way it all played out was kind of interesting. So I had the idea, I don't like books, right? I tell people that all the time is that and when I say I don't like books, I have to explain what I mean by that. So I feel like most of the books that are in the self-help, personal development genre have really good ideas, right? Usually there's like one really good idea, two really good ideas, usually never more than three. And somebody takes that idea and they want to write a book about it, but the book ends up having a lot of fluff then.
Right.
Because I can read the first 2 or 3 chapters of the book and I understand what the idea is of the book. And then I'm like, well, I got to power through and read the rest of the book. And then I just end up frustrated with the rest of the book. And so that's what I mean when I say, like, I love a good novel or sit down and, hear the rain on the roof and read a good story or something like that. But I just, when somebody said, you need to write a book, I'm like, but why? But because I don't like books.
Right.
But then it was like, well, you know what? Maybe if I could figure out a way to write a book I would want to read, that I guess that doesn't really matter if nobody else reads it, because I'm going to write a book that I want to read. So if
you wrote a book though that you want to read, you're making an assumption there are other people like you.
Yeah, and that's really that's probably not a great assumption to make. So people tell me all the time, well, you're different. I'm like, well, I prefer unique, right?
Okay.
So, but anyway, so I had this. I knew probably a year and a half ago what I wanted the book to be about. And so I came up with a title for the book, and that title is Start with Stop.
Okay.
And it kind of, I'll get back to this after I finish the rest of the story. So then I was like, okay, well, how do I go about doing this? So I sat down and I started kind of trying to come up with an outline for it and everything. And then I actually engaged with a publisher. And as I started to listen to other people tell me what they thought I should write the book about. And so I had written a leadership course, right, for Gage Bontrager Consulting, and it was very well received. People loved the course. I didn't write a book, right? So a lot of times people write a book and then they write a course to go with their book. Well, I wrote a course, so then people are like, well, now you need the book to go with your course. And
you do teach that and take companies and groups of people through that leadership training.
Right.
It's one of the things you do as an occupation.
Exactly. It's basically what I do as an occupation, right? So is coaching and consulting, and the leadership program is a big part of that.
Right.
So I started then kind of shifted. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I need to write a book about that. Well, I kind of lost my passion then, because it wasn't what I was excited about writing a book. It's like, so to me, I was like, well, that's just going to be like a textbook, right? And I got to the point where, like February of this year, I just stopped. I stopped. I got to stop this. I've got to reset this somehow. I stopped thinking about the book.
Right.
Because it wasn't the book I was excited about writing. And then literally now, I guess if I think back, it'd be less than 2 months ago. The passion came back for the book, and I knew I was ready to write the book. Now, the interesting thing about it is I sat down and I started to write about the things I wanted to talk about in the book. I realized that over the last year and a half, I pretty much had written the book. It was just all in different places, right? So some of it was in the leadership course. Some of it was revamped things from teaching the leadership course and interacting with people. Some of it was posts I'd done on social media.
Right.
I started a newsletter on LinkedIn. And then I was like, well, holy crap. I mean, this is not going to be that difficult to actually write the book.
Right.
So then I wrote the book. I mean, the first draft is done. I mean, the preface, introduction, table of contents, the 16 chapters, a conclusion, it's so now we're working on a cover, and so the publisher says, we're looking at about a 1 to 3 month time frame from this point before it comes out. So
the title of the book is Start with Stop. The inspiration behind that, if you could share with our audience what the motivation is behind that title for that book.
Sure. So I like to say, I'm not saying that you're doing it wrong, but if you were doing it right, shouldn't it be working by now? And really the thought process behind that is that all of us have heard the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting different results. And really, when we stop and think about just humanity in general, we're doing the same things,
right,
that we've always done. We're doing the same things that our parents did, their parents did. I mean, you just go back generations. I mean, at the end of the day, what changes is the stuff around us.
Right.
But most of us are just trying to get through every day and not die.
Right.
And hope to get up the next day. And then we do this cycle, we go through this cycle, right? I mean, you do this, these are the things that you do until you're 18. These are the things that you do from the time you're 18 until you're 65, right? Basically, you're working.
Right.
And you're trying to make a living, support your family, support a lifestyle, maybe do it a little differently than your parents did. But at the end of the day, you're still reaching for the same goal.
Right.
And you hope you get to a certain age and you can stop doing that. And hopefully you have enough money that you can stop doing that and still carry on the lifestyle that you developed. And you didn't lose your health and your relationships and everything else along the way to get there.
Right.
That's really the description of most people.
Right.
So the exceptions to that rule are few and far between. So really, if you want to think about the definition of insanity in relation to all of us, we're just a bunch of insane people because we're just doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result. So,
well, certainly we're creatures of habit, and we just exemplify what usually is modeled to us most often.
100%.
And then we see I work with people as well as you, that's where people often will reach out. And I think it's something we see a lot more in society and culture today, though. They want different results, and the awareness and the information, such as like your book, is out there. It drives people to try to make different decisions to get a different result. So I guess that's what I see when I work with a lot of folks.
Exactly. But if you're going to do something different that's going to make a difference, you have to stop doing what you're doing now.
Right.
So it's almost like, it's kind of interesting, and almost the irony of the whole thing was as I gave the introduction to how this whole thing developed, right? I was in a place where what I thought was going to work for me to write a book, it just wasn't working.
Right.
I had to stop. I came to a full stop, and I had to reset that whole thing. So I had to do a reset, and then you can't do a reset. If you do a reset, just you push the reset button, and all you're really doing is you're just waiting for that to power back up again, but you're powering up the same thing. Well, you got to hit the reset button, and then you got to power up something different, or else you're just going to end up in the same place that you were before. So the concept behind it is basically, if I want to start doing something different, I have to stop doing what wasn't working before. And so basically, and now we'll talk about, so what does the book look like and why is it different? As it's 16 chapters. Each chapter is its own book, basically. Okay. So each chapter has one or two really transformative ideas in it
Right.
for people to try, but they only have to read that chapter about that subject. Now, if you want to read the whole book, that's fine because there are underlying themes throughout the book, right? But if you want to go to chapter 8 and just read chapter 8, you'll get the idea from chapter 8 that would have taken you a whole book to read before. You don't have to read a whole book
Right.
now. You can just read. You don't need a book. You just need a chapter.
So each chapter is basically subject matter that
Yeah,
should be able to help somebody in whatever problem they're trying to work through.
exactly. Separately, I'm Gage.
And I'm Bontrager.
Together, we are Gage Bontrager Consulting.
We work on changing your mindset,
Developing leaders,
building systems and processes
helping you grow personally and professionally
to achieve the success that you want personally and professionally.
however you choose to define success for you.
Reach out to us and follow us on social media or look us up on the website, and that will put you on a path to achieve what is missing in your life.
Thanks for watching this episode of Mindset Growth Podcast.
Excellent. So the biggest preface that I'm gathering out of this is we've got to make distinct decisions in order to change the course of what the result is that we're looking to achieve. So that's
Right.
where you start with stopping.
Start with
and
stop. Right.
Basically, at that point, you analyze, make a conscious effort in changing the course.
Yeah. So I like to say, I'm not saying I'm right, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm here to challenge assumptions.
Right?
So if we don't challenge those assumptions, then we're just going to end up staying in the same cycle that we've always been in, that our parents were in, their parents, or their parents, their parents. We're just going to end up always being in that cycle. And if we want to change that, it starts with one person changing the cycle for the rest of the people that come after them. And maybe the idea that I present isn't the one that you want to start with, right? Once you stop doing what you're doing. But I am presenting you with an idea to consider that's different than the way you thought about it before.
I think that's interesting to me is we all make a lot of assumptions. And I feel like I see it with my kids. I'm sure any parent can. And I know that I did the same thing. But we're taught just from observation growing up, and when we're late teenagers, early 20s, we don't have world experience, but we have visual knowledge. And I think often it causes people to become opinionated, but it also causes people at that stage often to follow right into the footsteps of what their parents are doing, even when they don't like maybe some of the decisions and things that their parents did. I mean, I'm human. There's things I hope my kids do differently than I do, but I sit back and can watch and see some of them are starting down that same path. And I guess I just want to highlight that a little bit because I don't think there's any age that it's too soon to really stop and analyze and map out a plan of where you want to go with your life. I find that if there's young people listening to this or parents, I think we often hear the phrases like, well, they look like their mom, they act like their dad. But the truth is, every parent wants their child to achieve at a higher level than what we've achieved. So that's a whole nother subject for another time because we're going to get into a rabbit trail on that. But I think what you're doing with this book is you're really just causing that line in the sand for somebody. And I think it should transcend age brackets and groups. It can really be effective for anyone.
Yeah. And, there's somebody asked me like, well, who's the book for? And like, it's for anybody that is looking for something different to try, right? I'm not saying that it's for everyone because there's nothing that's for everyone, right? But if you're, let's say, the burned out entrepreneur, for example, right? And you're trying to figure out, how do I cope with every day, I get home and I just feel like I'm on a hamster wheel.
Right.
There's something in there for you. If you're, if you're midlife, couple, your kids are moved out, right? And you're trying to figure out, okay, what comes next? There's something in there for you.
Right.
If you're younger people that are just starting out with families and have just had to figure out, what does life look like now? Because it looks so much different today than it did before 2020. Everything in our lives has looks different post COVID.
Right.
Right. And how do we frame some of these things, right? So there's something in the book for that. So it really does have the ability to touch a lot of different age groups, a lot of different scenarios. I mean, even an older person who's like, they're not done with their life yet.
Right.
And they want to understand, how do I transition over to the legacy conversation that we have with people, right? So there's something in there for them. So I don't want anybody to buy the book just because there's somebody that reads books to check a box to say, I read so many books, because that's not the point of the book.
Well, I think people go through transitions in life, and you mentioned it. It can be divorce. It can be the loss of a spouse. It could be a bad breakup in a business partnership. It can be shifting retirement, you name it. There's so many different things, career changes. In any of those scenarios usually cause people to question what they've done leading up to that point. So it's interesting to hear that there's something that's probably going to fit for those people. Where can people learn more about you and find you if they want to follow you to see when this book's coming out and where they'll be able to buy it when that time comes?
Well, so soon there'll be a landing page on GageBontragerConsulting.com that'll be talking about the book and be announcing the pre-sale. I think the way it comes, it'll be available, I think, as an ebook first, and then it'll be available in paperback, and then it'll actually, we'll have all that information. The one platform that I use more than any other is LinkedIn.
Right.
So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you're going to see more. I mean, I try to put the same stuff on Facebook that I put on LinkedIn, but I've always been a bigger fan of LinkedIn than Facebook. Right. That's just a personal preference.
Right.
So look for me on LinkedIn. My picture's on there, so if you're watching this podcast, then it'll be easy to figure out. I'm sure there's more than one Ray Gage on LinkedIn, even though there's only technically one of me. So thank God.
I was waiting for that.
Well,
and I think if they follow you on LinkedIn, they're going to get a taste of what's probably going to be in the book, because it's a lot of similar things in there. I know you post different comments and different topics that you write about. So it'll give them a flavor of what's going to be in the book.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
Well, what I would say is if you've ever read a book about leadership, if you've ever read a book about habits or balance or time management or relationships or communication, there's a purpose, right? For example, I'm trying to think of some of the other subjects of the book, because there's 16 chapters. You're going to get something from this book that's going to look and sound a little bit different than what you've gotten from any other book. And it'll all be in one chapter. So to me, that's the key. That's what I want to leave you with is if you pick up the book or you see the table of contents, then there's going to be something. There's 16 chapters for a reason, and I don't know what the reason is. The reason is for you.
Right.
Right. This isn't to help. This isn't the answer that you're looking for. This is a way to help you discover how to find the answer that you're looking for. There's a reason why there's over 100,000 books about leadership, for example. And it's not because there's 100,000 different answers to the question, how do I get better as a leader?
Right.
That's 100,000 plus different stories of how other people did it. Your story that will work for you is probably in one of those books. There's no way you're ever going to find it if you're going to just start reading them, because you don't have enough time in your life to read those books. So this is the book to me. That's what that I like about the book. That's the reason for the book is how can I help you start to find the answer that's going to work for you?
And the thing I think for the audience too, I would say there's stages of people's lives that are going to cause them to look for a different answer at a different time. So it's one of them books that can probably transcend some of those stages as well. I want to thank you, Ray, for coming on the podcast, sharing about the book and that it's coming out and where they can find it. Want to thank you again for the effort and the work you've put into it. I know this book's an accumulation of really a career and then transitioning into coaching because of your desire to see other people succeed. And I think this is just another piece of the puzzle for that. So we appreciate your efforts in trying to make this world a better place. It's, I know you like to challenge assumptions on Mindset Growth Podcast. I like to usually use the tagline, change your mindset, you'll change your direction. And that's all different ways of how we do that. So want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Mindset Growth Podcast. Check out Ray on LinkedIn and also follow him to find out when that book's released. You will not be disappointed.